This is a documentary about the Jarawa people and their tribal reserve, home to the indigenous Jarawa tribe, also known as Jarawa tribe or Ang tribe. The Jarawa tribe is on the verge of assimilation and a possible integration into Indian life and Indian culture. This documentary will firstly look into what drove two French filmmakers to visit India 3 times and filmed a documentary about this untouched tribe inside Jarawa territory, which is India's highly prohibited area. The filmmakers risked arrest and imprisonment if caught inside the Jarawa territory. Filming the Jarawa tribe is illegal, but somehow the two filmmakers miraculously managed to elude the watchful eye of the Indian armed guards and police for 3 years. It took more than 5 weeks to finally complete this documentary. Watch all the way to the end because you might miss something very important. Show some support by liking the video, share and subscribe. It does help a lot with the algorithm. The Jarawa territory is located in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands in the west of Bengal, India. The territory is a highly protected area where visitors and outsiders are banned and forbidden to enter. Unfortunately, the Jarawa are at the verge of losing their nomadic lifestyle due to assimilation and integration, which I will cover in this documentary later. A few years before the French filmmakers made a documentary about Jarawa people, the Jarawa tribe had accidentally shot to fame after passing tourists filmed them dancing. Unfortunately, this incident unknowingly exposed their untouched tribe to the world. A few years after this incident, the government cracked down on what was seen as human safaris against the Jarawa tribe. In October 2014, chilling reports surfaced that two French filmmakers, Alexandre Derames and Claire Belvet, have been going in and out of the Jarawa territory for 3 years. During those 3 years, the filmmakers managed to film a documentary about a 2-year-old Jarawa boy with his family and friends. Apparently, the filmmakers won the Jarawa's trust by offering them bags of rice in exchange for filming them. In 2015, Andaman authorities issued a restraining order against the French filmmakers to stop the release and publication of the documentary. Reports suggest the filmmakers used local poachers to enter protected forest area of the restricted Jarawa tribal reserve in the Andaman Islands. And was it ethical for those filmmakers to offer food to the Jarawas? The western coast, of which the French filmmakers travel from, is a long distance away, and there are Indian naval forces guarding this 250 to 300 kilometer stretch. The film producer, Alexandre Derames, allegedly entered the 300-kilometer long reserve by boat after paying members of the Maya Banda community, whose territory is the closest to the Jarawa reserve. 2 Maya Banda members were arrested for their complicit in helping the French filmmakers enter prohibited territory and filming the Jarawa tribe. What's baffling is that these French filmmakers miraculously managed to enter such a protected and prohibited area carrying high-end camera equipment without the knowledge of any official. According to Indian law, it is entirely illegal to film the Jarawi in any way. Those who break the Protection of Aboriginal Tribes Act, which seeks to protect the tribes from outside influences, can be sentenced for up to 7 years in prison.
Baile nama Itale. Over jagan mera taikol attu na tathi papi na se. Ate mia. Tajale li mahu ai pamma da mahu elaha mohai. Aji kawa dari bate pale tu male tu.
French filmmaker Alexandre de Reims witnessed the Jarawa tribe being treated like human safari by Indian tourists who made daily crossing through Jarawa territory in a convoy of vehicles. Vehicles and buses are escorted by officers. When buses and vehicles pass through the Jarawa territory, no one is allowed to get out of the vehicle or communicate or give food or anything to Jarawa tribe. Alexandra watched helplessly as tourists continued to violate Indian law with impunity by taking photos and videos from inside their vehicles. After witnessing tourists and outsiders exploiting the Jarawa tribe, Alexandra was prompted to make a documentary that highlights the government's plan to assimilate and or civilize the Jarawa by slowly encroaching into the Jarawa territory. He also launched a campaign called We Are Humanity. The campaign aims to raise awareness of the Jarawa tribe's fate and to fight poacher problems, and also fight for the closing of the road that cuts through Jarawa territory. If the road is closed, then human safari or the human zoo will stop and the Jarawa will eventually prosper. The population of Andaman and Nicobar Island tribes is vanishing fast. There are less than 400 Jarawas left, less than 200 Sentinelese, and less than 100 Onges left. A brief footage of Alexandra's film about the Jarawa is included in this documentary. You can also watch the entire Jarawa footage on Alexandra's video on demand service, or you can purchase a Jarawa photo book for $30 on his website. You can also sign a petition to help fight for the Jarawa's existence. Alexandra's website link is in the description of this video. The first friendly contact with the Jarawa tribe was made in 1974, and since then the Jarawa have become non-hostile to authorities because the authorities brought them gifts of coconuts, bananas and other fruits. The Jarawa continue their semi-nomadic lifestyle as hunter-gatherers and fishers. They hunt wild pigs and lizards with their bows and arrows. Their arrow tips are made of iron. The Jarawa do not use dogs for hunting, unlike the Onge tribe. Who are the Jarawa tribe? The Jarawa tribe are one of the tribes living in one of the Andaman Islands east of India. They are the descendants of the first humans who migrated from Africa to Asia 50 to 60,000 years ago. The Jarawa are the biggest tribe residing in the western and southwestern parts of Andaman Islands, and some are found in Middle Andaman. The Jarawa tribe isolation from the rest of the world is crucial for their survival. It is estimated that less than 400 Jarawa people remain in the whole world. Just like the Sentinelese, the Jarawa speak their own language, which the rest of India does not understand. The Jarawas used to be hostile to outsiders, but 2 decades ago, around the early 1990s, everything seemed to have changed. The Jarawas are no longer hostile to outsiders, and this has resulted in alcohol dependency, diseases, and dying at an alarming rate. The Andaman Islands are made of many Andamanese tribes. These tribes are one of the earliest African natives in Asia. They are the original inhabitants of India, the indigenous people of Asia. You can watch my North Sentinel video to understand more about the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Scientists have called the Andaman forest one of the most pristine forests left on Earth that's untouched by human activity. According to scientists and historians, 4 of the tribes in the Andaman Islands are of African descent. In the 17th centuries, the Jarawa tribe were described as Negroid, looking more like African people than Indian, Sri Lankan, Burmese, Indonesian or Thai. The tribe fiercely protect their land and mostly live as hunter-gatherers. The Jarawas, the Great Andamanese tribe, the Onge tribe, the Sentinelese tribe, the Shompen tribes and the Nicobarese tribes are all classified as particularly vulnerable tribes. The 6 mentioned tribes of Andaman and Nicobar Islands are vulnerable to diseases that could wipe them all out, as they are susceptible to infectious diseases due to their poor immunity. The Andaman and Nicobar Island had the Jangil tribe. The Jangil tribe was also known as the Ratland Jarawa. They live in the interior parts of Ratland Island and were related to the neighboring Jarawa people. Sadly, the Jangil tribe were extinct between the 1910s and the late 1930s. The jungle were first encountered and documented in the mid-19th century. Direct contacts with them remained scarce. They avoided encounters with outsiders. There are only a few reported instances where outsiders, like the British and the Indian settlers, encountered individuals from the group. The last such case was in 1907. Expeditions sent to the island in the 1920s failed to find any signs of habitation of the jungle. Their disappearance and extinction were most likely as a result of introduced diseases to which they had no natural immunity. British naval officer Maurice Vidal Portman, one of the few outsiders to have made contact with the jungles, reported that their language was unintelligible to him but seemed to have noticeable connections with the Jarawa. The Sentinelese are the most isolated tribe in the world who continue to protect their way of life by shooting poisonous arrows at anyone attempting to enter their territory. Watch my North Sentinel documentary to learn and understand more. According to reports, the Sentinelese are taller than the Jarawa and the Onge tribes. The body of the Sentinelese is also known to be more muscular than the other two tribes. Another tribe found in Andaman Island is the Onge tribe. The Onge tribe live in what is known as Little Andaman Island. The island is not open to visitors and tourists. Access to Onge settlement is strictly restricted to protect their culture and way of life. The Onge tribe refer to the North Sentinelese as Chankuante. Onge tribe are not and have not been in touch or in contact with the Sentinelese. There appears to be some confusion as to whether the Onge tribe referred to the North Sentinelese people as Chanku Ante or whether that reference is towards Sentinelese-built canoes. The Nicobarese tribe live in Nicobar Island, which is a no-go area and not open to the public. The island is restricted and access is limited to Indian armed forces and researchers with special permission. The Shompen tribe are also among the most isolated, living only on the island of Great Nicobar in the southern part of the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago. Most Shompen also reject all contact with outsiders. Mr. Samir Acharya founded the Society for Andaman and Nicobar Ecology, SANE, saying, "This is an organization that fought for the protection of particularly vulnerable tribal groups of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And for over 3 decades, Mr. Acharya fought for vulnerable groups' tribal rights." He was 76 years of age when he died.
Unfortunately, this myth that you can have anything in this society is propagated by the government. When a Jarawa boy, I have personally seen a Jarawa boy coming to a shop, standing in front of it, and he wanted a belt and a bright buckle. The shopkeeper telephoned the Andaman Adam Jati Sabha, which is the government organization, and the telephone, he was instructed to give it to the boy and bill it to AHFs. See, this boy was led to believe that he could walk into any shop and pick up whatever he wanted, which is far from the truth. So if the Jarawas are really assimilated into the national mainstream, as the government professes to be its aim, there will be a disaster.
Instructed to cut the outer boundary of working plan area for extraction the timber, for survey the area in the middle of the Jarawa territory.
We should stop encroaching into their territory. We should restore to them their traditional land by closing the Andaman trunk road.
I simply one day when I passed through the trunk road, after seeing all these people in a precarious condition, peculiar condition, without any clothes, without anything, and begging from each and every passers-by, that annoyed me very much, because I am, after all, I am also a human being like them. We have no difference, but since I am civilized and they are not civilized, this is the only difference.
If the Jarawas choose to live in the forest in the way that they are living, let us permit them to do so. Accept the Jarawa way of life. If Jarawas could be brought to live like the Onges in a single village, an enormous chunk of land will get released for forestry operations, and the Lord knows in Andamans, the Andaman forest, rest of the Andaman forest do not have much harvestable logs left.
Assimilating the Jarawa tribe to Indian life and culture will have the same consequences that the Onge suffered.
They are suffering from diseases maximums now, because with our contact only, because they have come to the civilized world only.
The Jarawa are a nomadic tribe who survive by hunting. More and more villages are popping up near the Jarawa territory, and as hunter-gatherers, the Jarawas do not understand what's happening to their natural habitat, so they end up in local villages and markets where they are eventually rounded up by authorities and transported back to their forest habitat. In 1970, a 230 kilometers road was built to connect major towns on the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. This road is known as the Andaman Trunk Road, in short ATR, or the National Highway 4. The locals call this road the Jarawa Road. When passing through the Jarawa territory, it is possible to catch a glimpse of the Jarawa tribes as they are visible on either side of the road. However, private vehicles are not allowed, and all convoys of buses and trucks are accompanied by armed guards. The Andaman Trunk Road is a source of controversy because it exposes the Jarawa people to outsiders and the potential dangers of human interaction, which can be detrimental to the Jarawa's way of life. There are concerns that the construction and use of the road contribute to the erosion of the Jarawa's traditional way of life. In response to concerns, there have been discussions and plans to construct alternative routes to shut down existing section of the road that passes through the Jarawa habitat. The road runs from Port Blair and connects with other major settlements like the Feragunj, the Baratang, Rangat, Mayabanda and Diglapur. Controversially, this road passes through the Jarawa Tribal Reserve, home to the indigenous Jarawa tribe. There are concerns that the road leads to the exploitation and mistreatment of the Jarawa tribe, as it poses risks of disease transmission to the Jarawa tribe, who have no immunity to common illnesses. The Supreme Court of India has issued orders to close the road to protect the Jarawa people. However, despite court orders and recommendations from organizations like UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination, the road has not been fully closed due to strong local opposition from settlers who rely on the road for access and economic reasons. The controversial Andaman Trunk Road serves as a lifeline for those who live to the north of Port Blair. Unfortunately, the road is highly used by tourists. Some of those tourists have no intention of breaking the law. However, other tourists have continued to break the law on several occasions by filming prohibited protected Jarawa tribes and uploading such footage on social media. Fast forward to 2025 and the Jarawa are on the verge of assimilation and integration into Indian life and culture with a unified national identity. After 19 Jarawa members were given IDs and the right to vote.
Unprecedented move. Indian authorities have now successfully reached out to few members of a reclusive indigenous community, a community that barely interacts with the outside world, can now pride itself on being part of the world's largest election. We're talking about the Jarawa indigenous people, natives of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Living in some of the remotest islands off India's east coast, the Jarawa community follows their closely guarded traditions and beliefs. They are a semi-nomadic people who rely on forest produce for their livelihood.
In what is a historic occasion for Indian democracy, 19 members of the reclusive indigenous tribal community known as the Jarawa community in Andaman and Nicobar Islands have been inducted into the electoral rolls, and they've also been issued voter ID cards. Basically, this enables them to cast their vote in the next elections over there. Let's remember that this is a tribal community that is completely cut off from the outside world. It is through the efforts of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands administration and an autonomous body known as AAJVP that this very significant feat was accomplished.
The Jarawa are expected to vote in the 2029 Lok Sabha elections. What is Lok Sabha? The Lok Sabha is also known as the House of the People in India. It is the lower house of the parliament. The upper house is known as Rajya Sabha. Election authorities have promised to remove a protective buffer zone and to bring the Jarawa tribe into the mainstream. This is despite the threats and danger such action poses to the tribe. Assimilation of the Jarawa tribe has been happening slowly. The Jarawa assimilation began in 1990 after local authorities felt a need to integrate the Jarawas into the mainstream. The Jarawa were resettled in 2 villages with an economy based on fishery and hunting. The authority chose and decided the style of clothes for the Jarawa to wear. However, this encroachment proved disastrous for the Jarawas, as most of them died due to the outbreak of measles and flu, which was the result of the Jarawa coming in contact with the outsiders. The encroachment into Jarawa territory only stopped after human rights defenders and tribal rights activists fought vigorously against the authorities. Assimilation of the Jarawa tribe is likely going to introduce harmful ideas, different cultures, and in the process affect their mental health, self-identity, and overall health. Unfortunately, assimilation comes at the cost of many deaths for these semi-nomadic tribes. The exact population of the Jarawa is unknown, but is estimated to be between 200 and 400. So how many have to die before the authorities realize that assimilation of semi-nomadic tribes is harmful to their health, as they lack immunity from diseases that the developed world brings to them? It seems lessons weren't learned from the Onge assimilation. Similar assimilation happened to the Onge tribe some few years ago. It took a long time for the Onge immunity to adjust to the developed world immunity, and as a result, many Onge perished, and there are less than 100 Onge left in the island. The same fate is dangling above the Jarawa way of life. Despite pressure groups campaigning for the Jarawa semi-nomadic life to be left alone, the wheel of assimilation is already in motion, and the question is, how many Jarawas will die as a result of assimilation and integration into the developed world? The Shompen tribe were the first semi-nomadic tribe to be assimilated and integrated into India's way of life and culture. In early April 2024, the Shompen became the first indigenous islanders to be issued with IDs and finally the right to vote in the elections. The Shompen continue to live as an isolated tribe of nomadic hunter-gatherers. They live in small groups that are identified by the rivers in the rainforest. They hunt monkeys, pigs, lizards, and crocodiles for food. They also plant small gardens, cultivating lemon, chilies, and other plants. Their religion is worshipping the moon, which they call Honu as their goddess. They refuse all interactions with outsiders, and this has kept them safe from the exposure to diseases suffered by other isolated tribes in the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. The Shompen have guarded and maintained a unique landscape for thousands of years, and their population is estimated to be less than 300. After the Shompen 2024 participation in elections, the Onge tribe followed in early 2025. The Onge have been slowly assimilated for a number of years and were issued with IDs in early 2024. The 2 semi-nomadic tribes, namely the Onge and the Shompen, participated in the Lok Sabha election for the very first time, respectively, marking a milestone in inclusive democracy. However, the question remains as to what they really understand about the developed world. How does this assimilation and slow integration affect their mental health, self-identity, overall health, different cultures, and how do they understand the world of which they have never seen before? The Onge experience of colonization and the sharp exclusion of Onge women from the domain of politics, official business, and decision-making continue to challenge the Onge women's authorities because traditionally, Onge women hold a prominent role in the community. They have independence and make final decisions on matters pertaining the community, whilst Onge men are the sole provider for the family and community. Despite the changing dynamics, Onge women have demonstrated a remarkable resilience and unwillingness to succumb to the imposition of mainstream India gender norms. Onge women insist on communicating in their native language and control their domestic and community decisions. The women are quick to challenge any attempts that undermine their traditional status, and as a result, they have emerged as the guardians of the Onge cultural identity. The Onge Onge women continue to assert their autonomy and independence by drawing strength from their cultural traditions. Their resilience serves as a poignant reminder of the importance of preserving the cultural diversity and autonomy of indigenous communities. Their traditional way of life and social structure is under threat due to the influx of mainland culture and the displacement and marginalization of their society. Traditionally, the Onge tribe live a semi-nomadic lifestyle, relying on the ocean and the forest for sustenance. The Onge tribe does not follow religious worshipping practices or engage in sacrifices. The Onge practice a form of animism, with ancestor worshipping being a significant aspect of their belief system. The Onge were once the sole permanent inhabitants of Greater Andaman, which they call Gobalabambe in their own Onge language. The Onge lost part of the island around the 1940s when their island was occupied by settlers from Bangladesh and India. And in 1977, 2/3 of the 700 square kilometers of Onge land in Little Andaman were allotted to settlers and the Forest Development Corporation. These developments resulted in a massive decline of the Onge population. The Onge suffered at the hands of the British colonial rulers long before Indian and Bangladeshi settlers. In the 19th century, the British authorities forced contact upon the Onge, and after several British sailors went missing on Little Andaman Island in 1867, the British authorities went on the rampage and attacked the Onge tribe. It is estimated that between 60 and 80 Onge people were killed in the massacre. In 1976, the Onge were forcibly resettled by the Indian government and given basic facilities for daily living, and as a result of the resettlement, the Onge lost 732 square kilometers of the island they once inhabited. The Onge survived the 2004 tsunami, but their coastal settlements were left in ruins. They now live in temporary camps in the island's forest, which is a fraction of the size of their original territory. The surviving members of the Onge tribe are primarily confined to 2 rescue camps of Dungong Creek and the South Bay in Little Andaman Island, and much of it has been deforested. The tribe once inhabited the whole of Little Andaman, but the island is now shared by thousands of Indian and Bangladeshi settlers. The Onge still spend much of their time hunting and collecting honey in what remains of their forest. Wild pigs are a very important part of the Onge tribes, as they use them in exchange for marriage and also for food. The Onge have complained that wild pigs are now very scarce. The Onge are highly dependent on the Andaman and Nicobar authorities for rations of rice, lentils, and other commodities. The authorities created the Onge dependency on government handouts, and instead of finding a better solution, authorities have forced the Onge to work for their food rations. Despite the government providing food rations and medical care, the Onge's health continues to deteriorate as they suffer from high rates of malnutrition and low population growth. Infant and child mortality rates have doubled after the resettlement. Their population has significantly decreased over time, from 672 in 1901 to around 100 today. The Onge, the Shompen, and the Jarawa are all on the verge of losing their island after one of the authorities was heard saying the authorities plan to transform the island into the Hong Kong of India. Survival International and other pressure groups have been campaigning against this highly destructive project so that the Shompen, the Onge, and the Jarawa can live in peace on their own island. There is a resort situated less than 3 kilometers from Jarawa territory, and those running the resort claim that the Jarawa will not be exploited for tourism as they have no access to the resort's land. But what will stop curious tourists to sneak out of the tourist reserve and befriend the Jarawa for a selfie or a video? Any contact with tourists or outsiders will inevitably expose the Jarawa to diseases and cultures that they won't be able to cope with. The Jarawa isolation has helped them stay healthy and protect their culture from political processes that may upset their nomadic way of life. The Jarawa and other nomadic indigenous tribes have been protected under the 1956 Protection of Aboriginal Tribes of Andaman and Nicobar Islands. However, these indigenous tribes are often removed from their ancestral land to make way for tourist developments or to create national parks where animals take precedence over people. According to the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, every vulnerable community that lives in total isolation has a right to self-determination and preservation of their way of life. Cultural erosion has already begun since their native languages are not incorporated into their education. Assimilation and integration seems to have put aside their native language in preference of English and Hindi languages. How are these nomadic tribes supposed to understand an education system that does not include or reflect their communities? The textbooks, stories, or discussions will not talk about them or refer to them. There won't be any mention of their people, their culture, their way of life, and they are likely going to lose their identity, and this will likely create an overwhelming sense of invincibility and alienation. Education should be both relevant and rooted in their identity by making it bilingual and culturally drawing from their traditional stories, knowledge, and language. However, some Onge and Shompen children have also been attending schools and seem to be doing well in classes by achieving better results.
जब काचुअल लेके जाता है आप लोग क्या कहेगा या बोले ये दिमाग को जदा माल दिखे हे ओटा कोई को ये
अपना भाषा में बोलो ना अरे बोले
हम लोग का भाषा में जेल भाषा
हे मगर ढाले में पड़ा टम टीपीटी
According to scientists and anthropologists, isolated tribal groups have little or no immunity against diseases like flu and measles. Any contact with outsiders is detrimental to their tribes, and around 50% of their population die soon after contact with the outside world. Increased contact with outsiders will only expose the tribe to diseases and cultures that they will never be able to cope or deal with. Scientists and anthropologists concluded that one epidemic against these isolated tribes can lead to severe depression, alcohol abuse, dependency, and even suicide. However, authorities claim that assimilation and integration of the Jarawa has been partial and more or less at the Jarawa's own pace and volition. Anthropologists warn that assimilation and integration will lead to the extinction of the tribe that has lived in isolation for thousands of years. For instance, the Jangil were extinct in the 1920s due to assimilation and integration. The Onge tribe are on the verge of extinction due to assimilation and integration. And finally, Jarawa are being driven to the same path of assimilation and integration at the cost of losing many of their family members. The Jarawa are at risk because they live close to a holiday resort, but thousands of other extremely remote groups are also in danger. Governments and the tourism industry exploit tribal groups for their land and leave invincible destruction of indigenous groups. The Nicobarese tribe is the only tribe that has been participating in elections for many years. The majority of Nicobarese population are already on the electoral rolls. This makes the Nicobarese tribe the most integrated and assimilated people among the indigenous tribes of the Andaman and Nicobar Islands. Unlike other tribes like the Shompen, the Onge, the Jarawa, and the Sentinelese, who remain largely isolated, the Nicobarese have a significant interaction with mainstream Indian society and have largely adopted modern lifestyle while retaining distinct cultural practices. The Nicobarese population is estimated at over 20,000, making them the largest tribe that has left a life of isolation and hunter-gathering in exchange for modern life. The more reclusive and vulnerable Shompen tribe, who live in the interior of Great Nicobar, had their first vote in the 2024 general elections, followed by the Onge, who had their first vote in 2024, and the Jarawa are expected to vote for the first time in 2029. If you have not subscribed, please do so the channel reaches the 50,000 subscribers goal I have set. Don't forget to share and hit that like button. It does help with the algorithm. Your support helps me tell these stories, cover my travel costs such as flights, taxis, buses, trains, accommodation, visas and transportation for myself, and sometimes pay a local cameraman, as well as giving money to the most impoverished families, and also providing fees for local guides